Welcome to the Wealth Stream Podcast. The team at Hightower Great Lakes share their insights and passions for empowering their clients to live their best life. In this energetic podcast, we will take you on a journey to help you navigate your financial future, overcome life's challenges to reach your financial goals, and find the financial clarity you've been searching for. Let's explore the downstream impact of your wealth and what it means to you, your family, and your community to live greater.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Stream with Tim Scannell from Hightower Great Lakes. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well, Eric. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and it's so good to see you.
I know.
I know the audience can't see you, but
Eric can see me right now.
That's right. That's right. For the audience, if you haven't seen Tim, he is a handsome gentleman, and he's easy on the eyes.
For audio is what I do. Yeah.
Well, that makes two of us, so it's good that the cameras are off to the audience. All right, we didn't talk about our good looks today, or we did, but we didn't come here for that.
No.
What are we talking about today on the podcast?
So when we do advanced planning, we call it, for our clients, especially our business owners, it covers wealth transfer, wealth protection, charitable giving, wealth enhancement. One of the processes we have is what we call scenario planning. We also call it stress testing. But I thought I'd kind of walk through that process today in light of COVID and all the business owners, all the clients that I have this year who have had to completely adjust how they're doing things. And scenario planning cannot predict the future, but it does help you maybe be prepared more for events like this. And I think I've watched a lot of my clients adapt really quickly, change how their business models operate, change how they work. And I think some of the scenario planning that we've done with them has really helped. So I just thought it would be useful to kind of go through that process for the listener.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've never heard it called scenario planning, but I really, really like that because it kind of shows possibilities, right? It shows multiple paths.
Exactly. And, you know, it's so interesting because I'm an accountant by nature, and so I call it stress testing. And I had somebody say, well, you know, scenario planning is a nicer word. So it's really the same thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, when the marketing people get involved, they call it different things. But regardless of what you call it, the key takeaways today are really that scenario analysis is really about, or planning is about, considering, like you said, possibilities, alternative futures. We're not trying to predict the future. We're just really trying to consider what could happen. It's also it can be very simple. And in many cases, you know, clients are doing it. We're doing it ourselves with our firm. But it could also be very complex. So, and I'll go through the difference. And then the other thing I'll just say is scenario planning is great, but it really doesn't work unless you follow it up with some real strategic planning. Because if you come up with things you need to be worried about, concerned about, things you're trying to avoid, then you need to do strategic planning to, you know, address them and make sure that you're prepared and you're at least monitoring what could happen going forward. So that's kind of what I think the key takeaways are.
Okay,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so do you suggest this for every company?
I really do. I think at the very least, when we talk about simple scenario planning, I think everyone should be doing it. And I think when the listener kind of sees what the process is, they'll say, well, yeah, we're doing some of this already. And maybe, you know, just formalizing it, maybe just saying, okay, twice a year, once a year, you know, when we do our annual budgets, let's say, it's just something that we should always try to add into the planning process. So yeah, absolutely. Everybody should do it.
All right.
And it gets to kind of the why, you know, so why I think it's so important is that, you know, if you go back and we did a couple of two-part podcasts on what we call value drivers or knowing your value. And one of the benefits of identifying the drivers, or one of the ways you identify the drivers, is going through some of these scenarios, you know, like identifying really, or trying to figure out what is actually the most important things we do for our clients and how they drive the value of the company. But also, I think the why is really COVID, right? I mean, this has been such a traumatic year. You know, I have clients who are like orthopedic surgeons that are primarily offering elective surgeries who were shut down and had to figure out how to adapt. And I have restaurant owners, and I have contractors, construction companies, some of whom didn't really feel the construction industry. A lot of it didn't feel the impact of COVID or the shutdown immediately, but are starting to feel some of it now. Certainly, I have clients who are in the hotel industry, and some of them, they're just getting hammered. So I think everyone is adapting quickly. And then maybe now as we're looking into 2021, we can step back and say, all right, well, let's do a formal process and really think logically and long-term about what are some of the risks and what are some of the things I need to avoid. And that's why I think everyone should just consider scenario planning or strategic planning, stress testing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think of a couple different industries that I know personally have not benefited from COVID, but they actually did better in COVID than they thought they were going to do. And if they had done this process and thought about these scenarios, what happens if? I know early on when COVID hit, the concern was people's finances, right? So two businesses specifically, landscaping and also home repair and or remodeling, right? I know people that are in those industries, they were really concerned about people's finances drying up, right? Dropping, people losing their job, not being able to do what they're going to do to make their normal income. But the opposite happened for those industries because after a couple months, people felt more secure about their finances. The market changed a bit. And then they're stuck at home looking at their backyard going, well, I could really use a flower bed over here. I could really use a water fountain or a water. Yeah. I could use a water feature in this corner of the yard. Or as my wife said, we could probably remodel this bathroom. Okay.
Exactly.
But my friends that are contractors, they have been busy this entire time because people have been stuck at home going, okay, I could change this around. I could do this differently. And they actually have the finances to do so because they're still working. They're just working from home. And they're not spending as much money because they're not able to go out. So it's been interesting.
Exactly. And, Samantha in our office, who you interviewed for one of our podcasts.
She was fantastic.
She wanted a fence for her beautiful dogs, and it took 8 weeks to get someone to come out. So absolutely, There's some industries that really they can't handle the overload of work, and others that are needing to adapt to how they deliver. Mm-hmm. I talked to my accountant, Shannon Lee. She said that her restaurant business owners, that a little more than half of them actually their net earnings are better this year than they were last year. And obviously that's not good for the employees because primarily these were restaurants that had the ability and the space to adapt. They had the ability to do, curbside or,
mm-hmm.
Delivery, things like that. But they're working with fewer people. So it's the people, the employees who have been hurt the worst. But they have been able to adapt to figure out how to survive. And then hopefully, into 2021 or whenever we're able to open up permanently, they'll be able to really get some of those people back if they're still around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we talk about scenario planning, and what is it, it's really looking simply at alternative futures, right? It's sitting back instead of working in the business day to day. It's at least budgeting time to step back with your team and looking at alternative futures by looking on the business. So, for example, like for us, we're asking, how do we connect with our customers? And we're asking our customers, our clients, how do you want us to connect pre-COVID and now post-COVID? And is it in person? And some really want to meet in person. And we've figured out a way to do that safely in the office or at their office. And some absolutely want Zoom or WebEx. Some, don't have the technology, prefer the phone. I have clients in Florida a couple who really just don't do technology. So I'm still traveling to see them. As our team talked about, how do we adapt to this? One of my next gen people were like, well, how do we respond to holograms? I'm like, well, that's a good point. I don't see holograms as something that's imminent, but it's something we should think about, right? So it's not too crazy to think out of the box because certainly nobody thought that COVID would, or I'm sure people thought, but most people didn't think that this would happen and just dramatically affect business like it has.
Holograms, really?
I know, exactly. Well, imagine that would be pretty easy to see people, pretty cost effectively, I should say.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is that they already have the virtual reality goggles, right? You could, mm-hmm. Tim, I'm thinking you need to be setting up some cameras in your office, capture it in virtual reality. So instead of just a Zoom meeting, they can feel like they're sitting in the chair, right? They're right there. They can look around. They can see all the things in your office. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like going back to Star Wars and
That's
Luke
right.
Skywalker is being, zoomed up. And But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
So,
but the
yeah.
point is, it is definitely something, because I talked to our tech people at Hightower, and they said, yeah, that's actually a technology that will likely be available in the next 5 years. So
Wow.
things are happening quickly, Eric, as you know.
Yeah, I'm trying not to let it pass me by, Tim.
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness.
But really, scenario planning also, getting back to your question about should everyone do it, it's a process just like accounting, just like budgeting, just like human resources.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it really should be something that everybody considers adding just to their annual business planning process. Like right now, we're going through as a team, our business planning for 2021, and we're making sure that we're doing all kinds of scenario planning, because one thing that's impacting our industry, just like every industry, is technology advancing quickly, but also the next generation, and there's 3 next generations at this point below mine, they want to deliver differently, so, I mean, why the heck am I even podcasting, right? I mean, 2 years ago, it never would have occurred to me.
Yeah.
But I was, one of the drivers was I was at a holiday with my 2 daughters who are married and their husbands, and they're sitting on the couch talking about podcasts and how they really don't read. I mean, they read, but they don't read as much. They get their data, they get their news, they get their information on podcasting. So I thought, well, how can I connect with people? How can I deliver the information if I'm just doing it written and nobody reads anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's just one example of it. And, we just started doing videos. So I produced 3 or 4 videos. And I didn't even mention this to you, Eric, but we're starting to do something called bomb videos. I don't know if you've seen those, but
I have not. What is that?
So people get emails all the time. I get hundreds and hundreds each day.
Yeah.
And it's delete, delete, delete. And so one of the things that we've had some success with using these videos is there's just a very simple process where you just sit at your desk, you create a video, or you're out on your deck and you have your iPhone, you create a video, and you actually send a 20-second, 1 minute, small video with the email. So you're delivering your message verbally and visually versus in text.
Yeah.
And this next generation, and I keep saying that, it's probably a bad thing, but I think that I'm being told anyway, that's what people prefer. So we're trying it out, right? We're doing our best to figure out how to deliver and how to adapt and how to change. And a lot of that happened by going through the whole, scenario planning process.
Yeah, and I know that you've been practicing some different dance moves for TikTok. I don't know when you're launching your TikTok channel, but
well, I only became aware of TikTok as a result of COVID and politics, right? I cut the cable a couple of years ago. I don't really watch news that much. I mean, my life is stressful enough just thinking about the business. I read a lot. But actually, Eric, I didn't want to, tell the world, but you were the one who told me a couple of episodes ago that you and your wife watched some TikTok videos.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It made me think I have to start exploring that.
Yeah, I mean, it again, we always are trying to keep up with the times, stay ahead of the times. I love the fact that you started podcasting a couple of years ago. You and I have been doing this for, I think, 2 solid years now.
Yeah, 2 years, yeah.
You never, and I never, for that matter, never thought that a pandemic would hit, right? We never thought that COVID was going to hit. But here's the beauty of it. When COVID did, you were already ahead of the game. You're already delivering your message verbally, audio for people right at home, right? And we know a shift happened probably a decade ago that people wanted less and less written material as far as like quarterly reports. And, I don't want to sit down and read a 5 or 6 page document. Some people still do. Some people still want to do that. But give me the information in a nutshell. And if I can put headphones on and listen to it while I'm doing other tasks, boy, I'm more efficient that way. I'm probably happier that way. My wife, she loves to garden when it's not frozen out there, right? She loves to garden. She loves to do landscaping type stuff. And she will just put on headphones and listen to audiobooks. She'll listen to podcasts. She'll listen to music. Just depends on what she wants to do. And she can be out there for a couple hours doing that stuff. And just time flies. It's the same principle as why in the military they have cadences, right? They're working hard, they're marching, they're doing whatever, and they're singing cadences because it takes your mind off of it and you just keep going. And so this is the kind of thing that we're looking at for the future of communication.
Absolutely. And The other reason why you want to do, stress testing, scenario planning is really to try and avoid surprises like COVID, right? So I had done, in 2019, I interviewed 7 clients who were in the commercial construction industry, family-owned businesses. I also interviewed a number of their CPAs and attorneys, and I created a white paper entitled 5 Wealth Management Challenges Facing the Construction Industry. And I mention that because one of the things that came out of it, in particular from one of the architects that I talked about, was the bidding process. So when you're building a high school, when you're building a new hospital, when you're building a new post office, the traditional bidding process, especially with some of the larger deal contracts, where there's a RFP goes out, request for proposal, then there's basically everyone submits a blind bid and they open them up. And what's happening now in the industry, apparently, to some extent, is now there's more collaboration with, like, the architect is collaborating with the contractor, with the subs. So in many cases, the bids never even get RFP'd and sent out. And the point is that if you're traditional focusing on the bidding process like you always have been, and you're not focusing on how things are changing, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities to do, big construction jobs, big contracting jobs. And it's just going to pass you by, because then you're not going to know in advance to kind of watch out for that stuff. So that's just an example of kind of why to, not just to address industry changes, address demographics, address things like that, but also to try and avoid surprises, that can be devastating to your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So assuming you say, Tim, that makes sense, right? We need to do this. There's either a simple or what we would call an advanced scenario. And really, at the very least, I think companies should focus on the simple scenario where, you're getting together with your team. Maybe your CPA, your CFO, your internal team, and then you're basically going through a process where, number one, you're defining the goals and trying to identify the things that you need to look at. Like, so for us, one of the things that we think about a lot is how do we connect and how do we plan for the children and grandchildren of our clients. So if we identify the clients where we're really focusing on their family, I want to make sure that, they're trying to create a legacy. They're ultimately trying to transfer wealth. They're trying to prepare the next generation to receive the wealth. If we're not helping them prepare the next generation, if we're not serving the next generation, we're not doing our job. And when I reach out to some of their kids and grandkids, they see me as my declining years, like I talked about in a previous podcast. So one of the things that we've done is we've really focused on hiring younger, high-tech, smarter than me, next-gen great advisors like Samantha, Justin, and Wes in our office here in Valpo. And I do that because, first of all, I think they can connect better with the next generation, but also they're more in tune to how they want it delivered. So, for example, one thing that has come up recently was, if you think about how you use your iPhone, if you think about how you maybe listen to podcasts or the way you pay for things, a lot of people now pay subscription services. They're more than willing to pay a monthly fee to get something that they want, like cable, like their phone, things like that. So we're exploring, as a way to maybe attract and do planning for some of the children and grandchildren of our clients, is, should we be doing that? And we did all kinds of scenario planning, and we ultimately concluded that the industry is telling us that there is a market for that. The industry is telling us, and we're seeing that there is a market for that, but the market is not developed enough to where we really want to allocate a lot of resources towards it. But at the same time, we determined we wanted to be aware of it, and we identified some key variables that we want to track just to kind of monitor to see if it's becoming more and more impactful and if it really is becoming a market. So again, just an example of kind of how you might want to do it in a very simple process like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all heard this. The pioneers are the ones that get the arrows in the back, right? If you're too early into something, it can cost you too much money to be on that quote-unquote cutting edge, and it could be detrimental to your business. So I love the fact that you're tracking, keeping an eye on it, and you'll be ready to pull the trigger when and if it's something that is desired, needed, and is going to be most effective for you and your clients.
Yeah, I used to always joke that my older brother was, he swore the Betamax would beat the VCR, and of course, most people don't even know what I'm talking about. But he always spent the money to buy the first out technology, you know, the brick phone, right? The bag phone. And I used to say, if you just wait a little bit, you might be able to get something better for less, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but he had it first, Tim.
He did.
I'm sure that was
he had
always
a cool house to go to,
yeah.
that's for sure.
I'm sure.
But even just like a list of factors, you know, this is the next thing. You kind of list out the things that you think are important. So, you know, for us, and everybody, I think it's technology. For us and for everybody, it's always looking at who your competitors are. When I talk to my commercial contractor clients, you know, when business gets slow, they find some of the larger competitors kind of lower their minimums and kind of come into their territory and to some extent underbid, where they're just trying to maybe keep their employees busy and not necessarily make money, but that's not good for, you know, my clients. So you just need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of new competitors. You know, we think all the time in our industry, is Google going to be a competitor? Is Amazon going to be a competitor? You know, I have a client who's in heating and air conditioning, and the way that they get their products now are much different than the equipment is much different from how it was. And to some extent, a couple of them anticipated that and they're doing well, and others didn't and they're not. You know, I have a client who is in a very large, very successful commercial construction contractor. And I remember years ago, this is probably 10 years ago, they got into moving dirt. So obviously when you have a new construction project going, the first thing you see on the road is they're starting to tear down trees and move dirt and level dirt. And they had never been into that part of the business. And I asked him why they expanded into it. And he said, well, one of the reasons is if you look at the construction cycle, where sometimes, you know, bids are out, things are good, but sometimes they're not. Generally, in the very beginning, they're moving dirt. So if we can diversify our revenue source and diversify our revenue streams, we're going to be a much more solid company and much more secure. So, you know, just an example of how they went through the process and determined maybe there's some new product lines that we need to get into, and what's the pros and cons, and what's the best case, you know, worst case, et cetera, if they did. And then once you kind of identify the categories and the things you want to, you know, really focus on, we have people break it out into like, well, what are the factors that really affect them? So like the social factors, like for us, you know, how do people like to listen, learn, collaborate? Or demographic, you know, because people are moving more, do I really think of my business, for example, as regional or even local? Or should I start thinking it as national? Because I do have a lot of clients who are now all over the country. And with technology and the way we're delivering via Zoom, et cetera, we're able to serve clients just as well maybe in Florida, California, and all around the country. So you got to look at that, and demographics are really big for everybody. And so then we have them write a description of each category. We focus on, you know, what's the best case, what's the mainline case or the worst case that could happen. You know, like what if people don't travel going forward? How does that impact your business?
Yeah.
We then try to produce a 1 or 2 page kind of summary of each scenario. And then really, I think one of the key areas is to develop a list of indicators to watch. So again, in that example I gave about subscription service, we're not going to do it right now, but we have a series of indicators we're going to track and monitor to see if we should be moving into it. So those are really the steps that focus on the basic approach to scenario analysis. And really the advanced planning or the advanced scenario planning that we will have clients, we'll kind of work with clients on, it's the same process, except it really involves more of your team, for example. Maybe it involves off-site, you know, where you're taking Saturday or Sunday and you're really working together as a team. It also involves bringing in maybe consultants. Like in our case, we brought in Kelly Cruz out of California. She helped us with organizational charts and personality testing, and David DeVoe with benchmarking to make sure that, you know, our pricing and everything we're doing is competitive. And we rely to a great extent also on Hightower and some of the other teams that I collaborate with. But as a bottom line, the more sophisticated ones, more advanced scenario planning, you're involving more people. You typically have some sort of facilitator and outside consultants, which I highly recommend. And you're just looking at more detail, you know, more scenarios, more options, and then also more variables to look at. So I think that, you know, getting back to your question, I think everybody should do it. I think a lot of business owners do some variation of it, but I also have business owners that, at this point, they really don't do formal budgeting even. So I really think it's a very important thing to do to prepare for things that could happen, and also to kind of focus on maybe what's happening in your industry and your business itself.
Tim, I'm going to challenge you on
Okay.
not on what you just said, but I'm just going to challenge you. You know the ins and outs of what people need to be doing to work on their business, not just in it, right?
Yes.
Do you think you could put together a list, or we could call it a white paper, but kind of a list of maybe one thing a month a business owner should be focusing on? Maybe, so just once a month, if they block some time, and as a coach, I put my coach's hat on here. Time blocking is one of my favorite things, but block some time to work on the business, right? So like you said, if they don't even have a formalized budget, take one day in a month, maybe that's the January month, and you sit down and you block that time to do the budget, right? That next month, maybe it's, some sort of longer term planning or scenario planning. You start one of the steps of scenario planning. Could you put together a list like that for business owners?
Yeah, I definitely think that would be, we have our more formal checklist, but I definitely think, yes, the answer is yes. I can break it down, and we can put together kind of a process where we offer one a month. And then in addition, offer the listeners and our clients and whoever's interested, more detail if they want to get more information or implement some of these things, and also talk about maybe some of the pitfalls, of in the process too. So yeah, I would love to do that. I think that would be a great follow-up after this podcast to the listener.
Yeah, I just think that there's so many of us business owners that we get caught up, right? We just get busy, and all of a sudden 7 months have gone by, and like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this or I haven't done that. And it's a great reminder to be able to put something on a calendar, especially if you could put together a list, whether it's every month or every other month, just to put it on the calendar, know this is the day that I'm going to do this is what I'm going to tackle. And that way there's no excuses really. And that might just help people get off their butts to do at least some simple stuff until they reach out and actually work with your team and really tackle the hardcore stuff that's going to drive their business in the future.
So I'll just leave everyone with the thought that you need to take the crucial first step to commit to scenario planning. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, contact us, go to our website, check out the monthly ideas that Eric is now going to have me do. Thank you, Eric. Yeah. But also just reach out if you want more formal processes and planning anytime, and we'd be glad to help.
That's fantastic. Tim, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, obviously, but really I appreciate the time that you put in, and this is free information. Right. This is you're not charging for the podcast. You're not charging for your white papers. You're not charging for all the information that you put out there. I know you well enough to say that your heart is all about families and business owners, being one yourself, a family member, and yep. You're running a family and you're running a business.
That's my passion. Yep.
There it is. Yeah. And so I love that. So thank you again so much for your time. And can you give contact information one more time just for those that didn't get a chance to write it down the first time?
Sure. If you want to reach me, my direct phone is 219-246-5370, or you can send me an email at tscannell@hightoweradvisors.com.
Fantastic. Of course, last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast with Tim Scannell. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Tim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family and your business partners. This is definitely one to share, because if you haven't done this, it's a good idea to start planning now. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Hightower Great Lakes, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insight that you can apply to your life and share with others. Please don't forget to subscribe below to be notified when new episodes become available. And don't forget to live greater. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hightower Great Lakes. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Hightower Great Lakes is a group of investment professionals registered with Hightower Securities LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with Hightower Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC.